Hi, everybody. Welcome to the next in the RAS Step Up to Work Comp Success, one of our personal favorite topics here at RAS. Today, we're talking about Work Comp 101. I'm Kelly Marshall. Thanks for joining today. As we get started, just a couple of things. Everyone has entered with your phone and your computer audio muted. However, if you do have any questions that come up as we go through Work Comp today, feel free to use that Q&A feature. Enter your questions there, and we will go through those at the end of the webinar as time allows. Today, we're talking a little bit about what drives your workers' compensation costs and having a better understanding of those, reviewing some of the claim management best practices, and of course, highlighting the importance of early return to work. So whether you are brand new to workers' compensation or you've been doing it for a while, hopefully you'll glean just a few things today that will help make workers' compensation a little bit easier in your daily lives. As we get started here, I have one quick question for you all. We're going to be talking a little bit about experience modifiers, EMOD, and I want to get a better understanding of those of you who know what your EMOD is. So you should see this pop up on your screen. I'll give you just a second to click. If you know that your EMOD is over a 1.0, under a 1.0, or you don't know, but after this, you promise you'll find out because you'll understand how important that is. Looks like everybody has had a chance to answer. There are several of you, the majority actually, so don't feel bad if this is you, that don't know what your experience modifier is. So I hope that after we're finished today, you will not only have a better understanding of what that is and why it's important, but you'll be able to take a little bit deeper dive into finding out what yours is and how you improve it if it's not where you want it to be. All right, so just a little bit about understanding workers' compensation costs. It's important to understand that your work comp premium that you pay each year, that base rate is set by the State Division of Insurance based on recommendations from either the State Bureau or the NCCI, which is the National Council on Compensation Insurance. Those base rates reflect the hazards associated with the particular work exposures in your place of business. So they're different for everyone. You as the employer have very little control over what that base rate truly is or any other premium discount factors. What you can control, however, and this is why work comp is unique and also one of the most controllable lines of insurance, is your experience modifier. So we started with that question because it's really key to understanding where your workers' compensation costs are being driven from. This is something that you can have a fair amount of control over. That experience modifier is based on your own unique history of claim frequency, claim severity, or your claim costs, and any wage reimbursement expenses. So let's take a look at this. Experience modification, again, is determined by NCCI, that National Council on Compensation Insurance, and that's based on a claim history of your unique workers' compensation claims over the previous 3 years. So workers' compensation is lagging in that way, in that we're looking at the experience that you've already had to help determine your current and your future work comp premiums. The examples here will be illustrated based on a different EMOD. So when we're talking about experience modifiers, 1.0 is considered to be kind of that break-even point. That's the average across the nation for your type of industry. You can see pretty quickly how this can make a big difference in what you're actually paying for workers' compensation insurance, however. So on the bottom of this slide, you'll see that base rate for $100,000. If you have an EMOD of 1.0, that break-even point, then you're paying exactly that same base rate. That modifier doesn't impact the price that you're paying for your insurance premium. $100,000 is what your insurance premium would be. However, if you've done a really good job of managing your workers' compensation claims, you don't have a ton of frequency, you are able to keep people at work, get them back to work quickly as soon as that is safely possible, and you're fortunate enough to have an EMOD under 1.0, so in this example, a 0.8, then that base price actually gets discounted when it's modified by that 0.8 EMOD, and you would be paying a premium of $80,000 for your workers' compensation premium. On the bottom example, if you've had lots of claims, maybe some very significant severe claims over that 3-year period look back, and end up with an EMOD over 1.0, so here 1.5, that same base price of $100,000 after it's impacted by the EMOD would result in a $150,000 workers' compensation premium. So you can see even just in this example how a couple of points on that EMOD can make a really big difference in terms of insurance premiums. So again, EMOD 1.0 is that starting point for any expected losses in your industry. I mentioned this very briefly, but the things that can impact your experience modifier, or EMOD, are the frequency, so simply the number of workers' compensation claims that you have. And I would caution you not to take that too literally here, as we don't want to discourage you from reporting claims, because that's still very important. And truly, frequency doesn't become a huge impact on your EMOD until it gets very significant. So please don't take that to mean we don't want you to report all of your claims. It's still important that you do that. The bigger impact here are the bottom 2 bullets, the severity of your workers' compensation claims, and then most importantly, any lost time claims or claims where an injured worker experiences an impairment rating. We'll talk a little bit more about each of these. So those 2 types of claims that impact your EMOD are divided into medical only claims and indemnity claims. So medical only are claims where sometimes this can be a little bit of a misnomer. It doesn't mean that they are only a medical claim. They can still involve pretty significant treatment or injuries, but it simply means that no lost time wages are paid to that injured worker. So you're able to find work for them to do, keep them at work after they've had an injury, and we're still paying costs on any medical bills, any treatments, procedures, things of that nature, but they don't have any of those lost time wages that are owed to the employee. When NCCI receives that information, medical only claims are given a discount of 70%. So of that total claim cost, only 30% of those are actually reported to NCCI as something that will then impact your future EMOD. So on the contrary, indemnity claims are claims where an employee has some sort of lost time wages and or possibly an impairment or a settlement that's paid to them. On these claims, where there is indemnity or lost wages associated with that injured worker's benefits, when those go to NCCI, there's no discounting received. So 100% of those claim costs are reported and therefore impact your future EMOD and premium. So as you can see, this is why we like to talk a lot about return to work, and usually those claims examiners are very quick to ask you if there are things that you can bring an injured worker back to work to safely do. You can see there's not only a pretty significant financial advantage to avoiding lost time and keeping your injured workers at work, but it also shows that they'll get better more quickly if you can keep them coming to work. However, it's easy for us to say that and to ask those questions, but early return to work doesn't just happen. In fact, many of you probably know it takes a lot of effort and teamwork to make that happen. However, they say that on average, about 75% of all lost time claims are not actually medically necessary. Instead, they're due to things like delays in medical treatment, in referrals to specialists. We know how hard it is to sometimes wait on that phone tag and back and forth phone calls, and can also be due to just an unwillingness on the part of the employer to offer some sort of a transitional or light duty opportunity to those injured workers. Once again, we know that this doesn't just happen. That's why communication is as important as ever, and it's significant in every step of this process in helping to manage not only each individual claim, but on the aggregate, how that rolls up to impact your overall workers' compensation experience and your future premiums. So let's try to make this as easy as possible. starting with early reporting. So we know that it's important for us to get notification about those claims as soon as possible. The sooner that we're made aware of a workers' compensation claim, the sooner that we can begin that investigation process. The claims examiner can then help with directing and getting that injured worker to the appropriate medical care at the right time, getting those tests, getting those referrals for specialty screenings, diagnostics, treatments, procedures, those sorts of things. And we know that when employees start to treat on their own, as opposed to simply filing a workers' compensation claim immediately, medical costs tend to skyrocket. Oftentimes, what we see is that an employee may be treating on their own, trying to decide if they should consider this a workers' compensation claim. And at the time that it then reaches our desk, the employee is at the point that they've probably exhausted a lot of those potential avenues, and instead they're waiting for referral to surgery or an MRI or something else significant. So the sooner that you as the employer and then we as the insurance carrier know about a claim, the sooner that we can start to investigate, that we can start to get that injured worker to the right care that they need. As an employer, your role is really to help that injured employee understand how to navigate through the claims system. So it's important that you understand this so that then, of course, you can communicate to them what will happen next. So it's important to know you're really setting the tone for this episode. You want to make sure that you know that they know that you're concerned about their well-being and that you show support for them and their condition. Let them know what to expect. We know how often we all get phone calls or text messages these days from an unknown number, and most of us are hesitant to answer or respond to those things. They will get those calls from claims examiners, and it's important that they respond to those and get them the information that they need in a timely manner. Early return to work. Important and valuable, as I mentioned, not only because of how that impacts your future EMOD and your future insurance premiums, but because of all of these reasons that it can also impact the employee to be off work. When an employee is off work for a significant period of time, it leads to a loss of their strength and endurance. They aren't going to work. They aren't going through the same practice of getting up, getting out the door, doing their daily tasks to maintain just that simple strength and endurance that it takes us to get through the day. They can lose their sense of self-esteem, self-worth, their identity. Certainly, there's the loss of earning potential as well. If an employee is receiving workers' compensation benefits, we know they aren't receiving 100% of their salary. And they just start to lose that ability to work. You start to lose your strength and endurance, but pretty soon you lose your motivation too. They can also experience anger and depression due to all of those things. As they lose their sense of self-esteem and earning potential, you start to experience that sense of loss. So when you have that employee who's coming into work, you can continue to oversee them, make sure that you're communicating with them, and make sure that they understand that you want them to come back, that they're a valued part of the team, not only for the financial impact to your organization, but for the impact to each of those individual employees as well. So we talked about the decreased cost piece of this. So if you have an employee who doesn't have any time away from work, of course, that results in a lower claim cost overall. But then you can see how that cascades down into that lower EMOD, which then again relates to your lower workers' compensation insurance premiums for not just 1 or 2, but 3 years down the road. Injured workers who come back to work during that healing period also tend to require fewer medical treatments overall, and therefore tend to incur even less medical expense. So it's all a cycle that results in better outcomes for the employee, but also fewer costs for you as an organization. Medical Disability Advisor tells us that people get better faster, which probably isn't a surprise if they stay active and they stay engaged in their lives, which includes their work, as much as they possibly can during and after any medical episode that they might have. Work can become part of their therapy. So as I mentioned, we all know what it's like to be sick for even a day or two. We start to lose our fitness, that muscle tone very quickly when we're inactive. So modified work assignments, even if you have an injured worker who comes back to work and maybe isn't able to do a full day or all of the duties that they once did or they hope to get back to doing, even modified work tasks or continuing to perform parts of their job or pieces of their tasks, those can become part of their rehab process and kind of provide that bridge between where they're at right now and getting back to their regular work, their regular tasks, their regular hours. When you bring injured employees back as soon as you can, then you naturally have that additional communication that happens. When someone's coming in to the office every day, they just naturally keep those connections with their supervisor and their coworkers. As we start to drift away, you just don't have those same conversations when you don't have the same proximity and interaction. Tensions over reduced hours, loss of a job, loss of different parts of your job are eased when the employee is back and they can maybe see that in the distance. It might not be right away, but they see that they're here, they're working on getting back to the things that they were doing. And it helps with that sense of self-esteem and self-worth as well. So, how do you build a return to work program? Well, the first and best place to start is by creating a return to work policy. If you don't already have one, we do have several sample return to work policies on our RAS portal. So if you don't know how to find that or you don't have access, please reach out to us. There are templates that you can use. It doesn't have to be complicated, but to start with a policy, even as simply as saying we support early return to work after a work-related injury is a good place to start. Next, it's also important that you use job descriptions that are written and that are objective. So make sure that you have good job descriptions. If you don't have those, that's the first place that a claims examiner and then a treating physician or a provider will look to say, what is it that you do and what do we need to get you back to safely doing at work? It also can help to have a return to work champion or someone who really represents that cause amongst your employees and in your facility, someone who is the cheerleader, who understands why it's important and can help to encourage the rest of your team when we have those tough tasks, especially that come to supervisors, and you're forced to come up with some ideas for something that someone can do for weeks on end with limited use of everything but perhaps their right arm. That can be a tough ask. And so it's important to make sure that everybody's on board and you have not probably just one, but lots of people who are willing to champion that cause. And finally, if you don't already have one, I would also suggest that you brainstorm a list of transitional duty tasks. Again, we do have these and several that are industry specific on the RAS portal. But even if you have just kind of an ongoing list of maybe some things that you've had an injured worker do in the past, you can continue to add to that as you have different opportunities come up. They may even be things that are project specific or department specific, but that you can go back to when you have someone come to you with maybe some limited physical abilities. And you can go back to your back burner and say, oh, I knew somebody was asking about a project or a task, and maybe it's something that just doesn't make its way to the forefront, but that might be something that fits in the period of time where you have the right match with an employee who needs something to do for a period of time, and then something that still fills a business need for you as well. So we talked about immediately reporting injuries, and this is why you'll see that that's important. Overall, claim costs were significantly higher with each of those subsequent delays, as you'll see here in that day of reporting. So when an injury is reported just 11 to 20 days after the date of injury, that claim cost is 29% higher. But when you jump to an injury that was reported more than 30 days after the date of injury, those claim costs are nearly 50% higher than they would have been otherwise. So again, the more that you can encourage early reporting, make sure that employees let you know right away, and that then you in turn let the insurance carrier know right away, the better handle that we can have on starting to manage those and making sure we're getting employees to the right care at the right time. So your recipe for return to work success here is to, again, get that policy in place and to follow it consistently, educate your employees, and make sure that they're getting that prompt medical care. Identify medical providers if you don't already have a partner provider who knows what you do and understands your return to work philosophy and knows that they will be asked by you to identify what that employee can do as opposed to what they can't do so that you can find the right fit for them to come back and perform some sort of a modified duty task in the meantime. You can let them know, as I said, your return to work philosophy and that you intend to bring people back to work as soon as is safely possible. What transitional duty tasks you have available. So this is where, as I mentioned, if you have that running list of tasks that you may be able to offer to someone who needs modified duty, this can come in handy at that point. And your intention, of course, to, when you need to, send injured workers their way. That will really help to just cement that relationship and make sure that they have a good understanding of what you're looking for from them in a partner, and they can understand what you're looking for as an employer as well. So in order to best manage your workers' compensation costs, not only is return to work important, but it's important to understand where these injuries are coming from. So make sure that if you don't already, you know what your causes of injury are. You know how people are getting hurt. You know where they're happening. Is it a particular department or a task even? Is it a certain one of your locations or your buildings? Is it a certain job title or position, a certain work that people are doing, where you tend to see these? As we better understand what the trends are and where the claims are coming from, then we can work towards getting to the bottom of helping to provide some solutions so that instead of managing the claim, we can prevent the claim and the injury from happening altogether. So if it's not already, I would encourage you to set your goal at 0 indemnity claims. No claims would be ideal, maybe not always realistic, but certainly the things that you can manage in terms of return to work and any lost time wage benefits that may be owed is a pretty realistic goal. So every effort that you can make should be made to find modified work tasks for your injured workers and keep that goal at 0. Containing lost time plays a huge role in your cost savings overall and in long-term disability prevention as well. So to summarize, how do you help manage that EMOD, reduce your insurance premiums and your workers' compensation costs? Get those injuries reported right away. Manage your claims well. Make sure that you know what's going on and be on top of what's going on with those claims. Provide early and prompt return to work when that's applicable. Include accident investigation as part of your claim investigation as well, so we can dig to the root cause of those injuries. And ultimately, injury prevention is truly your best strategy. You don't want to continue to put your profits into your insurance premiums. So the better that you can do at managing them and preventing those injuries in the first place, the better off you will be when you start to look at what that EMOD is next year. So before we take a peek at any questions, I wanted to just let you know what's coming up next. You will get a quick survey when you close this webinar. I think it's about 5 questions, but it helps us to understand if you're looking for more Work Comp 101 or 2 or 3, or something else entirely, things that you want to see from us in any future webinar events. You'll also get a follow-up email with the link to the recording from today. So if you missed it, or if you have others who might benefit from this information, feel free to share with them. We also have all of our webinars now available on the RIS YouTube channel. You can find that by going to the events tab on riscompanies.com. And we've got all of our webinars there. So hopefully you can check those out if there's anything you've missed or that you would find to be of interest. In August, we have a special Step Up series coming up for our partners in the school system who are getting ready to go back to school, where we'll be talking about avoiding participation-related injuries. So we'll be back to your regularly scheduled work comp programming in September, where, believe it or not, we will already be getting ready to talk about winter slip and fall safety and injury prevention. So if you have any questions, please feel free to enter those. There was one question about finding the EMOD in the RAS portal. And this might depend on what your level of access is. So I would be happy to follow up with you after that as far as your premium documents go. And if you would like a copy of the PowerPoint, we can include that as well in the follow-up. We do have a recorded version of our Workers' Compensation 101 available as well. We've got some of you that are already looking forward to winter as well, it looks like, and talking about our penguin and slip injury prevention resources. So I'm glad we're getting ready for winter. We will see the penguin return here very soon. If you do have questions about the RAS portal, please feel free to follow up with us. You can enter that when you do your survey following the webinar, and we will get back to you. You can contact us at policyservices@rascompanies.com as well. If you do have any follow-up questions, feel free to send those our way. There was a question about an employee with a work-related injury who refuses treatment. And the question was if you should still file a claim at that time. And I would recommend that you always file a claim if there is a specific incident that you can tie to a work-related injury, even something simple like this, where it might be a cut or something that an employee chooses not to seek medical treatment for. You can file the claim as no treatment, and that way it's been recorded. And should it come back around or they have further complications, then the claim has been filed. We don't have to worry about any sort of late reporting consequences or things of that nature. It's also a question about a claim where an employee perhaps didn't use the proper PPE, even when PPE was available to use. While I am not a legal expert, nor am I the claims examiner or expert, these are certainly questions that can complicate a claim. And in the general scheme of things, I would say that could potentially impact the compensability of a workers' compensation claim. Unfortunately, of course, it's not entirely that simple. We can't always simply deny a claim just because an employee wasn't using the PPE that they were advised to use and that was provided to them. I would suggest that that's always important information for our claims examiners to understand. So the more information that you can share when you do have those claims about what was available to employees, what your policies and procedures were for using PPE while completing a particular task or activity, those are very important pieces of information for us too, to help further determine that compensability of that particular claim. Great questions, everybody. Also a question about repetitive motion, and these can be tricky claims as well. The question is, how do you know if you should report if there isn't a specific incident? So things like repetitive motion, carpal tunnel, cubital tunnel, tennis elbow, those kinds of tendonitis types of claims tend to be more repetitive in nature and aren't necessarily associated with a particular incident. So certainly when you report those as a workers' compensation claim, you're essentially going to have to kind of make an educated guess about the date of injury, since that's oftentimes an onset over time. But that would be important to note, truly just when the pain started and kind of what the course of that has been. So when it comes to the point that an employee is starting to talk about it, maybe starting to complain to others about it, or is thinking about seeking treatment, I would recommend that that's probably your tipping point for when you want to report something that might be more of a repetitive injury type of claim. I appreciate all of the questions. And if there are further questions that weren't answered today or that you would like to reach out for more information, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we look forward to visiting with you again soon. Thanks, everyone.